How's everyone doing? Kicking some asses? Having fun? Back in English. English install. Okay, this is a tricky subject, and, well, they're all kind of tricky. They have multiple nuances, so we'll figure it out and balance things out. I have a general premise, and there's been a couple of understandings that kind of came up recently, spoken about it in one video prior, but I want to unfold this idea and subject or potential idea of generational gap. Now, what do I mean by that? Different kind of language, different kind of habits, different kind of perceptions. And one of the factors I kind of notice when just probing it a tad bit further, and which is why I kind of want to mention people like Jordan Peterson, Sadhguru, Wim Hof, and various others from, let's say we could call that older or prior generation, is that oftentimes I've noticed a language that's very, it kind of dismisses the person's context. It assumes certain things, or it kind of puts a thing of, if you're not doing this, then you're that. And again, this kind of goes back to dualistic nature. I see it quite prominently in that kind of language, and even mostly in people in my generation as well. And it's kind of how do I bring this? Again, let's flow and see how it balances. It doesn't help, and it doesn't work. Here's the thing. I'll bring up a quote from Sadhguru, and I've heard it quite often. You've let your mind control you. You've let your mind become the enemy. And to that, on the spot, I would personally refer to, well, fuck you, because we didn't actively choose that. Now, to balance this out, I kind of had to understand that he had good intentions, yet the phrasing leads to an assumption that we ourselves allowed this, the division, the divisive mindset to take over. And justly, no, we did not. Because oftentimes, and something that a lot of people from that generation hasn't necessarily understood and grasped, and I know I'm harping on this a lot, but there is a massive influence to having had a television in front of you as a kid. There is a massive influence that cannot be fucking ignored. Now, that being said, I also have to understand that they haven't had that experience. So they are not talking, nor can they understand what it has been or what it has done from their perspective. Now, to bring light on this, and something you all will kind of notice and recognize, a lot of the shows that we've had when we were kids were anti-rich people, anti-having money, because most of the bad guys were rich fuckers. Why? Because they're rich. Surface level, bullet point type of bad guy type of deal. Yet, this is what we were growing up with. This is the kind of repetition that we grew up with. And then it's synced up with video games, because there were certain type of trends, methods of talking and expressing that continued from television into video game. And as video games became more and more cinematic, there was a continuation of that programming. So to say that we have, as a generation, allowed it is false, because in that very same premise, we can send the ball right back at the prior generation going, well, you guys should have fucking known that these little inventions were programming us as kids. Why the fuck were you doing it? And it's like, but that can't be said because there was no data at the time. The only person that had pocket full of people that had a knowing of this was the inventor of the television that actively told his family, do not put this shit in your mental diet. It will fuck with you. This is not why I invented those devices, those machines. He wanted everyone to understand language, to know language. He wanted to wipe out illiteracy. But then people with financial interests took over his inventions and did something completely different, which is why he said that to his family. Now, it didn't spread, that idea is understanding at the time did not spread to the mass, which is unfortunate because this is what it leads and creates a perpetuation of a very simplistic, and that's the limitation of the medium, but very simplistic, nuance-less dialogue. No nuance, just very simplistic, lots of assumption, stereotypes, and blueprint checklist type of mindsets. You'll notice it. Your television shows, especially soap operas, they are illogical. They often, and of course it is done for entertainment, but the problem that kind of came up is the one, being sat in front of that as a kid, two, gaining the momentum of being interested in one series to another series to another series to another series. You know, you develop a habit, you develop a momentum, you develop a considering this as normalcy. Okay, so the programming is not spotted at that age. It's not known. It's not understood. It's not even perceived. It's like, ha ha ha, these are fun cartoons. And in the meantime, all this basic bitch main character mentality is getting programmed in us. So we don't see it. That's why this kind of, and it's kind of ironic because the language actively, or you know, we were kind of programmed with a similar language, but it actively kind of turned us against the prior generation because of the further and further programming of righteous action. You got to be honorable. You got to stand for this, and this. And that's what's make you a great character, because when you do that, the Avengers music is going to kick in and you're going to feel awesome. And if you don't, then you are shit. You know, you're like that bad guy who's rich and he's getting taken down. So don't be like him. Don't be rich and don't be a bad guy. Then, you know, it seems simplistic. Yes, it is. But upon repetition, it becomes a normal lens of perception. So you got to be kind of very careful when you're bringing out that kind of old school dialogue. And even looking back at a show called Kids in the Hall, I was looking back at some of the parody music videos that they were doing, and I noticed a lot of very judgmental, mean-spirited, assumption-heavy type of dialogue, and it was just kind of like, well, that felt a bit like crass after a while. I understood it was at the time, yet this kind of dialogue does not, or the repetition of this kind of dialogue does not help foster unity and even compassion and understanding. It's very finger-pointy, dictatorial. It feels very finger-pointy and dictatorial from this current standpoint. But back then, it was allowed. So what's kind of tricky, especially when it comes to the dialogue that you try to bring to help people, is to kind of be a bit more cautious of how you interpret, or just being conscious of how you interpret other people without sending out assumptions or clearly assuming stuff from there. And at the same time, please never, ever, 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 ever assume laziness from people. Because when you start noticing, I've spoken about the television influence, but then when you start noticing what happens with those devices, social media feed, when the internet kind of came in, okay? This generation, and it's kind of ironic, I thought I was Generation X, but I was on the tail end of X. I'm actually beginning millennial. January 85. So, beginning millennial, fuck it. Yet, we had time to get to the curve of the internet, you know, getting into the new stuff really earlier on, getting into Napster, getting into, MySpace, getting into that, and eventually noticing that the constant kind of notification was getting annoying and tiring. So at this point, when the transition was made from those platforms to mobile, we kind of had this aspect of, you know what, I don't necessarily need to have that notification on. I had a time with MSN and all of that where, okay, yeah, I would reply on the spot, but now I feel it's much more annoying than anything, and I don't need to know if I get a new email every fucking time. We petered out the curve, okay, over a certain amount of time. Yet the new kids that get the cell phone, you can as a joking and loving terms, you can kind of bring it up as the iPad babies, those who had the iPad placed on their crib and were allowed this access to YouTube and internet quite early on. Well, eventually that normalized the dopamine deficiency that those devices and behaviors and platforms brought. Okay? It really made it normal for them, which is why you often see the neck downs, again, lovingly, neck down generation walking in the street, constantly looking at their phone. They haven't had a petering out. They haven't had a real kind of, you could say, having more than 5 or 8 years playing in the street as a normal thing without devices. Some of them just right out the crib, they get the iPad, and it becomes normal to go from one video to another video to another video, or to have that stimulus aspect from devices. So that also has an effect over time that I can kind of perceive, or people from our generation, early millennials, especially when it comes to having the internet, we can kind of logically understand how this dopamine deficiency was caused, because we had it in the first beginnings of how big video games came. It had a dopamine regulation that made it more and more normal to get dopamine hits from those devices and those particular activities, which then lessened the dopamine hit that we would get from, let's say, playing outside, going hockey. The behavior became, oh, well, my body feels a tad bit more dopamine. And of course, we didn't fucking know. Nobody really knows those technical terms at the time, nor did we have the stats. So the same way I can't blame you guys for giving us television, I technically can't blame ourselves from passing on those devices to our kids or, the next generation without necessarily knowing those effects. The blame game never works. It never did. That's why we could dive into cancel culture as well later on as well, but it doesn't work. It never did. It's not about blame. It makes no idea. It's like, hey, you should have gone to the future to know how it would work so that you would stop it. No, it doesn't make sense. It's like blaming you guys for not having this depth and level of psychology at that time, where we're getting it because of our complete interconnection with the world and various sources, and much more higher openness to discussing our feeling in this current state in society. So blame game doesn't make sense. Yet now the challenge with this is not getting reactionary when you're using this assuming dialogue. Again, when you understand how badly dopamine gets affected from those devices and how it regulates, normalize, make it feels like, oh yeah, it's natural just to pick up my phone, get a little message here and there, oh, reply to all my notifications, oh, sorry, I'm talking on this video, I'm gonna pick up a message, yeah, just gonna scroll through. Yeah, all this was kind of made normal over time in certain generations, later on generation, because they had those devices earlier. So, can't call them lazy. Can't. There's always an internal reason, both psychologically, both body, and now we're also figuring out metaphysical / quantum physics reason for a certain situation in place. So the challenge to make this kind of generational bridge is to, on both ends, wipe out assumptions from the dialogue. Like, again, I can't expect you to have known this. This is why this is getting laid out, okay? In as much neutrality and non-duality with as many nuances that I can bring in a moment, And then two, for the latter generation, not to react or get triggered. Because, especially in the aspect of triggered, so all of this being learned and indoctrinated behaviors. But when you realize the aspect that you can't assume the other person's context for them to talk to you that way, or to even bring out those words, you kind of peter out. You don't Peterson out, sorry. But it just kind of peters out. You just kind of go, Why is there that language? Or you kind of don't necessarily judge and assume the other person. You just kind of go, are you assuming this? Is this... Because oftentimes it's not picked up. Again, we are repetition's bitch. And we have to kind of acknowledge this. Whether it be a repetition of a specific kind of language in your television shows, in your TVs, in your media, in your movies. You know, this basic bitch main character mentality type of language. Very simplistic, okay? So, and the same goes with social media. Oh my god, that was the biggest trap. You guys from that prior generation may have not necessarily noticed the full extent of where that brought. But just think about it this way. Early internet, we thought texting was normal. We thought it expressed the meaning. It doesn't express shit compared to this direct conversation and talk and nuances being felt. Different nuances and descriptions being felt or being expressed to then be felt. You know, text, whether you blast 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs, you're just gonna fucking tire everyone else's eyes. Compared to this kind of conversation and talk. You know, the text doesn't express shit, but we thought it did. And what you've noticed, especially at the beginning of the internet, is a lot of shadow coming out. This aspect that we picked up habits from that prior state of mind and way of talking. So there are various aspects of, okay, well, I'm just going to assume that you're a dickwad for what you're typing, you know, and not even bat an eye at it. Instead of understanding, yo, the other person at the end of that computer is a human with a context leading to this kind of expression, which on its own doesn't express the entirety of that context that led to what's being said to then have a reasonable understanding, which is why they just look like a jackass on surface level. But it's because we were trained on surface level. Bounce it back to television. You know? We haven't gotten, at that time, especially early internet, we hadn't gotten to that complexity and nuance. So the reflection of it came out with various, you know, trolling, flame wars, and all that bullcrap. You can say waste of time, but at the same time, there's learning experience. Having been through that, there were some learning experiences of just, oh, right, let's not go through that again. Let's, you know, little complexity, little nuances, so much assumptions and judgment, you know? Which is kind of funny because you still see people on platforms like Facebook, Twitter, trying to express like certain things through typing and large posts, and it's like, no, we're not getting it. Please come out with your voice, talk, you know, make some videos. Or one of the things I love doing now is like Skype or Zoom, or that's it, or nothing. You know, so you want to have a discussion, awesome, perfect. Skype, Zoom, or it's nothing. Ain't gonna go into a post. Blah, you know, same kind of goes with the YouTube comments to a certain degree. You know, sometimes there could be some very interesting back and forth, but at the end of the day, it's still kind of it doesn't fully express what you mean to express from coming from the context that you've had and the individual granular definition of that context of which you're living in. You know, when you perceive how deep your perception is, okay, or how deep everything that you are living is, okay, and of course you slap the person that goes, oh my god, it's too deep, bitch, that's our normal human, you know, that's our normal human perception. It's just that we've been trained to look at basic bitch reality as normal. But when you go deep, again, 6 senses and then some, different realms of perception, you know, intuition kicking in and having synchronicities of event with one's own individual granular meaning. That shit counts because it makes life so much fucking awesome. You become a bit like a fine wine taster, you know? You love every granular nuance of what's happening in your life And of course, you retweak your internal talk because you don't want that shit affected by television or even social media, because most of it is just, oh my God, it's all bad. Oh, I want to look for the worst case scenario. Oh, I want to be careful of the worst case scenario. Yeah, and then if you're doing that, playing with the quantum law, you're attracting the worst case scenario. It's nuts. We didn't fucking know. Even when it came to the old school religious teaching, they were kind of hypocritical about it. As you believe it, so it is done unto you. Do unto your neighbors as you would want them to do unto you. But then you're going to start off criticizing people in the newspaper or in the radio or any other platform. Doesn't that remind you of the extreme left right now? Hey, I'm all inclusive and I accept every ethnicity and points of opinion as well as races. But if you're not in my group, in my collective, or you're not running my narrative, so you can go fuck yourself. Doesn't make sense, right? Exact mirror. This is a beautiful time because we got to see both reflections. Yet, this is a time of interesting balance and creating bridge, because as you've noticed, this generational gap, or just the idea of the generational gap, is kind of bullshit. Again, with non-duality, it is, but it isn't. It isn't because it's mostly affected by some of the shit that we watch and platforms we've used. But as a base, it doesn't mean shit, if you understand what I mean. Like, there's no differences between all of us. We all came in, again, I'm going to repeat that dialogue because this is one of the most important things to grasp in mind. We all came in the same damn fucking way. No words, no definitions, thus no emotional ties to words and definitions or logical concept. Ain't no evil baby, and ain't no guru baby. But still crossing my finger for a guru baby to come next couple of years, possibly. Still, all born the same way. Then, from that standpoint, based on the year, based on the society, based on certain words and definitions around that sphere, you learn and grow through a certain kind of formatting. You know, Windows 93, Windows 95, something like that. And from then on, you kind of roll in that momentum, but it is still not you at the core. And that goes for everyone. So we're all the same in that sense. We are already finding ways to kind of bridge that gap created by societal language and various structure changes, and also basic bitch main character mentality type of language from television and video games as well. So we're bridging that. As I said, what kind of never put a need on things, but what would be much more helpful, what would kind of help, would be, again, balancing this aspect of language and automatic assumptions. And it is a challenge because, again, 30 Days in the Desert was easy mode compared to now. 30 Days in this desert to battle Satan was easy mode compared to now, because Satan, being divisive thought, is now present on our computer, on our fucking phones, on our medias. You know, it is present. And because of that, people ingest that and then perpetuate it without necessarily knowing. Again, NeuroLinguistic Programming is a bitch when you don't know it. But when you understand it and you perceive it, then you flip it on its own head and you start having what's called a mental diet. Because enough eating some that McDonald's on a spoonful, thus enough binge watching, and you just do a back and forth. Again, this is not content creators' fault. We are all projecting what we've been influenced by. And it is not network's fault. Again, the blame game doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. It is just a collective understanding to balance each's inner world and inner perception and inner understanding, not each other's inner world and understanding. We can help each other, but it's not an aspect of I'm going to do it for you or I'm going to do it for that person. It is always mutual co-creation and cooperation gameplay, which was always this species' default and natural state. It has never been on the complete logical aspect. And of course, non-duality, yes and no. Okay, caught myself there. Right there. It has... Let me fuck it up and then we'll see how I can balance it, okay? It has never been might is right. Because if I see you completing something, I perceive it from my eye, I filter it through, and then I will make a variation of it. It's like, as an artist, I'll see multiple types of artwork. All of it is in my mental database. All of it is in my mental toolbox. And I can then recreate in my own specific energy, in my own specific way, in my own specific passion, a similar thing, but it'll never be the same. Yet I still learn from it just by watching it. Okay? It is co-op at its core. Now, yes, okay, if I can balance this out, yes, there was a period of might is right when we had that lower level of consciousness. Okay? Where we did not see the other as ourselves. Meaning, we did not understand that that other was literally born the same way and learns the same fucking way, or goes through that learning experience the same way. So, again, it took us a couple of amount of years, right? Up to 2000 and something years to kind of get to this point. So, the might is right was a lower level of consciousness. The competition, lower level of consciousness. Because if I see that by teaming up with you, by having conversations with you, by learning from you, and then getting to, if we were to, fuck this. If we were, whether it be Jordan Peterson, Sadhguru, Wim Hof, or anyone from that prior generation, if we were to have a very playful, fun, neutral conversation, I still learn. And then from that learning, I get to help other people that will learn from that experience. You see what I mean? It's like one and one does a third idea, an englobing idea. Again, yin and yang has a third form, which is the two, non-duality, which then creates a new form. You see what I mean? So it's learning, it's cooperation. And if we were not taught competition, comparison, and division, then the process of evolution would just skyrocket, you know? And of course, yes, there are manipulation by some people with interest in the background because they still haven't gotten the fucking simplicity of it. And of course, yes, they have their own indoctrination that keeps them in this very, very small, finite lockbox of might is right. No, not might. Money is right. And I am my name, I am my company, I am my lineage, I need to keep this. This is a need. But it's so limited compared to everything that will be perpetuated soon enough, because you're seeing the cracks in that system and in that mindset. That mindset is not sustainable, you know? It is very hypocritical, and ironically, it's not willing hypocrisy. Oftentimes it is not perceived. Again, we had a time when you would go to church and you would hear all this good stuff about unity, loving your neighbor, having compassion, but the organization itself was not compassionate against people they deemed not fitting their chart, you know? Again, church had its Windows 93, 94, 95, and some still remain back in 93 or even Windows 2.0 or something. You know what I mean? This aspect of I'm going to preach inclusivity, but then I'm going to act completely different. So we're going through this, you know, and the more we discuss, the more we have these back and forths and these realization, and the more we kind of shed our ego, kind of going, okay, I'm not getting attacked here. There is no attack. It's only a perceived attack. And again, that goes back to the indoctrination. Ugh. Man, we got to make fun of the or have fun with the fact that we didn't fucking know that these inventions would program this kind of mindset, right? The reactionary basic ass main character type of deal. But NeuroLinguistic Programming, power of repetition. You're not its slave. Maybe I shouldn't have said that prior. Or it's not really a bitch in a sense. It's basically just this sense of, we didn't know, look at the momentum it created, but now understanding how this momentum is created, we can then shift, we can then balance, we can then bridge and find a bit more unity-based common solution. And now when it comes to later millennials and then the Zs, you can see the exact same reflection of what has been indoctrinated by both television and parents. Again, the idea that your internal state, your internal mood is based on someone else's action. So cancel them if you want to feel good. Wrong. Okay, good, bad, right, wrong. Non-duality. It's false because it is your perception, your perceptual lens of what that exterior did and means that gets you the emotional reaction. It is not this exterior trigger, event, person, okay? But it's right because you were indoctrinated that way. If it wasn't for you being indoctrinated that way, then it wouldn't influence and affect you. Again, as a baby, you did not have those words. This is why it's a crucial point. So I understand and I feel for those stuck in that loop in those newer generation. Doubling down on the fact that, yo man, they're new energy, so they feel fucking thought forms. I was kind of shocked when I learned that, but then I'm like, right, studying channeling and metaphysical with the quantum, I'm like, oh wow, you guys are awesome. Oh fuck. You know, it kind of makes you realize, oh right, so my thought forms are affecting them indirectly, and with this whole, you know, momentum of media bombarding of fear and various aspects of depression, and of course basic bitch main character traits, they're feeling all of the ripple effect of people adopting those thoughts and then sending those out, whether it be verbally and even in thought. It all counts. Bible said that, now quantum physics says it, okay? All of it counts. If you're having negative conversations with yourself or fear-based conversations, even visualizations, it all counts. I say visualization because those people binge watching all those juicy negative shows, you know? You know which shows I'm talking about. Some of those new popular show. I kind of copies. No offense against the creator, okay? But it's Battle Royale mixed with Saw. Okay? You know what I'm talking about. And again, nothing against the creator. It's just that more and more people ingesting that will then have those mental triggers. Will then have those thoughts. Will then have that language. And then the newer generation, they feel it already. And it's like, oh, wow, fuck. So let's build some bridges, okay? Let's have those conversations. Let's have those talks. Let's have those discussions. There is no too deep. Only for people, and I want to reemphasize that because I've met some really... See, I caught myself. I've met certain people that were fully indoctrinated in that. And some people remember the story I told them when I met that animals right activist. Actimal Maximal! But that animals right activist, and he's like, do you eat meat? And I'm like, yeah, here and there. And he's like, oh, so you kill animals. And I'm like, whoa, wait. 2 different kind of actions, 2 different kind of vibrations. What do you want? Well, you know, you eat them, so you kill them. 2 different kind of actions, 2 different kind of vibrations, 2 different kind of feelings in the moment. Watch out. But it kind of clued me in on how subtle an indoctrination language is. And then I started picking up some of my internals to fucking indoctrinated language. again, some people have been kind of poking me on the side. Oh, aren't you doing comics? What happened? Weren't you doing animations or let's play videos like you used before? And it's like, well, there was an interesting time where I lived with a group that had a very, that were influenced by very negative language, and it got to me at one point, and now I'm clearing that shit out because it's not only them. It just kind of showed accumulation of that kind of language reaching a peak point. So certain things, like the way it affected me personally was that, okay, not good enough. I gotta achieve a certain standing. I gotta be in tune with certain crowds. I gotta multi-manage and mid-max, and I gotta be like all of these other people. And it's like, okay, eventually just lock out. If you ever played Killer Instinct 2030, just hit lockout. And it's like, oh shit, gotta rebalance that internal language, because fuck that. And then, again, and I'm glad for that experience. Glad for that group and everything that was held. Wish them good luck, and if they're open to, clearing some of these out, I'm always open. I would definitely be open. But I'm not putting myself in a negative environment, because that would be reflecting it back to them, which would then grow it, and we'd both be in the poo-poo. Literally, if you understand the law of momentum and repetition, we'd both be in the poo-poo. So, but yeah, eventually it just becomes an aspect of clearing, internal clearing, and just going, okay, let's clear this shit out, because I don't necessarily want to perpetuate that, because I didn't necessarily like the effect of having that perpetuated onto me and not even noticing it subtly. That shit is kind of subtle, right? But we're figuring it out. And yeah, it did kind of get dark. Welcome to Canada at this time. Doesn't really matter if it's Canada or not. So, always open for discussion, always open for dialogue, always open to discovering new methods, creating new practices, and again, keeping the idea, this is not the only one way. There's multiple fucking ways. Multiple. People are finding variations and creating their own variations, which I encourage to share. Do it. Talk. Get deeper into your feeling and their resonance with what kind of logic we were taught. Okay? Especially if you, again, we're programmed, indoctrinated with television and both masculine and feminine. You guys remember that speech, right? We were fucked over deeply in the kind of shows that we were catering to, and what kind of logic and disconnection between logic and emotion that it brought. So go deep. There is no too deep. Okay? Yet also understand that you can't expect everyone to understand your context to the degree that you do, because in a fraction of a second, you're processing so many things that are hard to kind of express in that fraction of a second. There's so much. And it's normal. This is the depth of who we are as a species. So, no context, or you don't try to force context, but you understand it. You are free-flowing and just talking about it, but you are not needing any specific reaction, okay? You're not doing it for a pity party. Remember, all of that is just dragging everyone down, literally. You are kind of just exploring meaning. You're exploring the depth that it brings. You're exploring the cognitive understanding that it brings, the thought, feeling to result kind of relationship that it has, and how it has varied, and what can kind of optimize it for more fun, playfulness, pleasure, and doing your own fucking projects and having fun with this and not being insistent on result. That's another thing. When it came to school programming, the insistence on a kind of result was one of the most toxic thing we've been indoctrinated with. And then it follows up in certain workplaces, It happens, and the more we discuss about it, the more we break it down, and the more we kind of flip into an aspect of a much better momentum. Because when you have insistence, you kill your momentum. You literally do. And of course, there's some non-dual aspects and nuance. We can talk about that on a different video, because as you've noticed, as we dive into nuances, it just extends and extends and extends, and there's so much more. But it's the name of the game, right? We ain't basic bitch main characters. We ain't a Facebook profile. We ain't a basic 1 or 2 page character description. We are so much more complex than that. Do not take this for granted, because there is so much rich content to create from when you acknowledge this. Again, ain't gonna know what's your favorite ice cream, how you got to it, what you mean by hot or cold, the weather or how your country affects that definition of hot or cold, how your clothing affects that definition. You see how basic that is, but then complex when you dive deeper. So texting about this, if you were to text a whole 2, 3, 4 paragraph on what hot or cold is for you, you'd have to extend it to a couple of pages for us to consciously grasp your experience. But at the same time, we get to learn a lot of things. So don't take it for granted. Don't assume. Go deep. Have fun with that. And yeah, let's have those conversations. I invite anyone. Just feel free. Text message, YouTube message, Facebook message, Zoom or Skype, whatever you want. Anything kind of goes in this aspect, but just to further in those understandings and breakdowns and have a back and forth on, what's been your indoctrination? How did it get you to perceive certain things? What are some of the blind spots that we kind of collectively miss, As I try to explain here when it came to the prior generation. A lot of stuff in the language that you guys learned was assuming and kind of ignored and forgot some of the different factors that came up through the time, and it's normal. Yet, those are some blind spots, very important blind spots to kind of possibly see when you want to help other people, because you could easily turn off people by just being in this very assuming place. And the same kind of goes for generational Y and, later millennials. You saw with cancel culture, massive turnoff. And again, with the quantum principle, you're just attracting a seemingly as powerful opposite because you're trying to apply force. It doesn't work. This is an internal balancing. So I guess throwing it out as a last thing, the best thing to do is come at it with compassion and be ready to get into discussions. Very neutral, loving, encompassing discussion. And also, you check your triggers. Because you can't assume people to know your triggers. Okay? So, at that point, we're going to be playing some back and forth tennis ball type of games. And it's exciting because we're actively playing this whole generational bridge type of game. Again, we're heading back to cooperation, the natural thing for this species. So, all right, before it gets dark, see you all, thank you all, and not to keep it on a negative note, or to even leave a negative impression, I appreciate everything that our prior generation has brought us to and said, okay? I do. I fully do, okay? Because then it's easier to recognize how in our own language, these assumptions can be laid. So I'm fully appreciative of that. Just kind of want to build a bridge and playfully kind of just have us collectively grow in this aspect of unity instead of competition, division. Ugh, why are you doing that? And assumptions of stereotypes. All right, so kick some ass, have a great one, and let's talk before the shadow realm starts popping up. It's only, what time is it? It's only 3. Wow, that's fucked up. Signs of the time, seasons. Have a great one, guys.